up your frozen dinners, grab your TV tray, and settle in for another episode of the Plus Platoon, your podcast for all things Disney Plus, brought to you by Disney Plus fans. Watch along with us every week as we cover all the new, the old, the good, and the bad on Disney Plus. So put down that remote, don't touch that dial, and welcome your fabulous Plus Platoon host.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Plus Platoon. We're a Disney Plus fan podcast that gives honest, spoiler-filled reviews of movies and shows on Disney Plus. We look at new releases, coming attractions, and we'll even go back into the vault to revisit some of the classic Disney that's on the platform. Make sure you're subscribed and you will never miss a moment. I'm going to bring in the traveling minstrel of our group, Kate. Kate, good to see you.
Hi, Derek. Don't worry, I'm still here.
Wherever here is, you're still here.
Wherever here is right now, it's at a dorm room in California. So,
which is so much fun for those of us over 30.
Yes, that.
Or older. So next we've got Pete. Pete, glad to have you with us.
Hey, yeah, it looks like Kate's in a bathroom or something.
Yeah. Okay, that's funny.
It's
That's
a
the exact
dorm
question I asked her.
That doesn't help. That's just the shower curtain.
No, it's a window.
Oh, okay.
This is why I can't have nice things. It's fine.
Sure. And last but not least, we've got Steve. Steve, glad to have you with us this week.
Hey, hello, everyone.
Guys,
Steve's just at home.
Yeah,
I'm just at home.
I'm back at home. Pete's at home. Kate's off gallivanting across the universe. So, guys, if you've not already, please like, subscribe, share. That way you never miss any of our episodes and any other fun stuff we might post on any of our social media. So, this week, we have watched the Stan Lee documentary that came out 1st of June-ish, I think, right around that time. And it basically follows Stan Lee's life in his own, 99% of it is his own words, talking about his life growing up. About the only things that aren't his own words are people talking about their relationship with him. His wife is in there a little bit. A couple of the other artists are in there, including a very interesting conversation at the end. And so it's got video clips. It has some interesting, like, model, almost like the stop motion type, or the is it the tilt shift type stuff that makes like movies look like they're like toys. But this one is truly models.
Yeah, I don't know how they did it, but it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know the name of that.
Yeah. So that was the documentary. It basically goes through his entire life up until basically starting the start of the movies, and showed some of his cameos, and then filming a couple of the different cameos that he did in the different early Marvel movies. So, Steve, I'm actually going to start with you on this one because you're the one who watched this first and told us it was worthwhile watching. Because, guys, if you don't know, we've made a rule that on something like this, if it's not something huge and there's not really any positive reviews about it, we're not going to watch it unless one of the four of us will actually like it.
Or unless someone requests it.
Yes. So, Steve, what about this documentary made it a collector's item?
Like you mentioned earlier, I really liked that most of it was Stan telling his life story himself. I thought that was a very interesting take. Just hearing him recount his story. I also liked the model thing. To me, it reminded me like of the train models, of how they set the scenes for it. It was very interesting. It was sort of like unique perspective. I'm not a big comic books person, but I like to hear the history of where some of these characters that I enjoyed as a kid came from, especially like Spider-Man. I mean, I remember watching Spider-Man on the Electric Company and realizing where the origin came from of there. So I really enjoyed that. it gave me some perspective. I mean, we'll talk about it later about the sort of the disagreement between him and I can't remember the other person, but I could talk more about that later. But I'd say those are the two standouts that he told the story himself and then gives the unique perspective of using the models to tell the story. What about you, Derek?
Yeah, I like the fact that it was in his own words. Kate?
Wow, really? I loved this documentary. I thought it was great. I was so glad that Steve requested it. It made me fall even more in love with Stan Lee. I have never been the biggest comic book fan. Like I think I only owned a couple Captain America actual comic books. But I loved it. I think that this is just as compelling of a story to me as the creation of Disney. It's different. But I just his drive and everything that he went through and having to I just thought it was fascinating. I'm shocked that oh man. Let's see what else was good about it. I did like that it was mostly in his own words. I love that they interviewed his wife. I just really, I think it made me even more appreciative of the stories of Marvel, knowing where Marvel came from. I loved it. Pete, what about you? My goodness.
I'm going to try not to repeat the same thing you guys said because I agree with your positives. I do like that they, kind of, seeing behind the scenes of the comic industry. For how much I'm a fan of Marvel movies, I was not a big comics kid at all growing up. So I was never really into comics other than like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. And that, they had those comics when I was really little, but as a teenager, it was more animated like TV shows and things like that. It wasn't comics. But I do think it's very fascinating that industry, how the aspect of it that they tried to, got to a point where they were like, we want to tell stories with our own voices and tell things that are more important. When they got to the point that they were, getting to like Black Panther and they were trying to talk about what was going on in the world and equality and things like that. I just think like, how we talk about like it's a medium that you can almost use it to teach kids, and even like talking about using, he said we're not going to dumb down words, we're going to use big words, and then kids can go and look up what those words are, and they can, it's kind of a gateway to learning. And I mean, I don't know if that was actually true or something he said after the fact, but I think that's one thing that was good to see, because to me, comics were put down a lot as a medium back in those early times, but it got kids reading, and that I don't think that was appreciated enough. So
I can definitely piggyback on that, because as an English teacher of kids who struggle to read, so many of them, I can get hooked, so many of them, with graphic novels, the graphic novel versions of some of the classics we have to read. Right. Can definitely if they can get it through the visual and some of the words, that can help, especially like things like Shakespeare that is never meant to be read. It is meant to be seen.
Right.
Yeah, I did like the part where, now, how much of this was him embellishing stuff, not sure, but the Say No to Drugs series that they did without the approval of the comic censor board, and how he and his publisher basically said, no, we're going to print it anyway. Again, is one of those things where, kind of help using it to teach kids, basically right and wrong in the big picture. Okay. Now, so that's what we liked about it. Pete, what about this should have thrown away in the recycle bin?
So I was glad that they touched on it at all, which is his penchant for taking all the credit for everything, because he did that for a lot of years. It was basically it was a case of like, everything was my idea. These other people were nothing but a pencil. And so very, very famously, especially in the later years as he was, getting to retirement and everything like that. And they touched on that with Jack Kirby. They touched on that with Steve Ditko. Those were really the only two comic artists that they touched on in this documentary. And there were way more than that were involved with Marvel. Obviously, those were two of the bigger names. But even so, the way that they showed it, they were like, oh, look at Jack Kirby did so much. And, he gave, he was always like in the credits and things like that. It makes it sound like, well, it wasn't really that big a deal, but it really was a big deal that he kind of tried to deny those guys any credit for the work that was done. I mean, he was, I'm not saying that he was a bad guy necessarily, but he was kind of a bit of an egoist. And
we'll definitely dive into that here in the next question also. Yeah.
So my biggest concern going into this documentary, that it was going to be all sunshine and lollipops, and I was glad that at least it had a little bit of that in there. But I kind of wish they had talked about that more. Some of the issues with him a little bit more than they did. So that would be my biggest thing that I would have liked to have seen, like more of a fair, balanced discussion. What about you, Steve? Anything else that stood out to you?
I'm gonna say the same thing. I felt like the thing with Jack Kirby sort of came out of the blue in the documentary. Like, it was all going fine, and all of a sudden you hear about this disagreement. It's like, okay, we talked about it and then moved on. Sort of like a quick here. I wish it was more that balanced. Really get into that discussion a little bit more. Whereas I know it's supposed to be about him, but I felt it was sort of like with Walt Disney and works of, oh, by the way, yes, we'll mention this, but not really get into that story, which that's what would interest me.
Yeah.
A little bit more of that. It was very much done to make Stan Lee look great, and all those positive things. So that's what I'd say. Derek, what would you say?
It was an hour and a half or a little longer that I thought could have been shorter, because they repeated some stuff a lot, especially about how, well, I wrote it, but they drew it, and sometimes I had to complete, sometimes I didn't even know what they did, so I had to be the one to redo the story. And they touched on that like 4, 5, 6 times, it felt like. Maybe it just seemed like that to me. I would have liked to have heard more from the people who interacted with him, honestly. Not just everything he said and his wife saying good things about him. I would have liked to hear from some not so nice things that people said about him. I would have liked to hear from, did he have any, people he hung out with? What was his relationship with, I don't know, other people? The marketing people would have been fascinating, because there was a time there where you not only found Spider-Man and everything, but you couldn't find some of the superheroes on anything. I would like to get him gone a little bit further into the X-Men, because that was like a 2-minute segment out of this whole thing was, oh, by the way, I'm going to have X-Men.
Yeah. I was personally fine with the length. I thought it, like, just as it was getting towards the end was when I started to be like, okay, this needs to wind down, and it did. So I was okay with that myself.
Okay. Anything you'd add about what you didn't, what might not have worked for you?
So the only thing that I might have changed is I would have liked to see more. They did a lot of that animation that you were talking about, Derek. The claymation almost.
Figures, yeah.
And And I would have liked, I think, have seen more if there were more like videos of him, of actually him, and like pictures of actually him, as opposed to the little claymation figures, which I'm glad that there was something there and it wasn't just a blank screen. But and I would agree. I would have loved to have hear from a little bit from other people, because it was pretty much just kind of a one-sided conversation. Like I would have liked to have heard Jack Kirby's side of everything that happened, and the other guy's side.
More than just that, 2-minute radio conversation.
Yeah. So yeah, it's, oh shoot, there was one more thing and now I can't remember what it was. Shoot, can't remember what it was. I had another thing, but I think it's just mostly yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way until you said it. I hadn't thought about getting a little bit more of the negative side of him, because it did paint him, in my opinion, it painted him in a really good light.
Oh, for sure.
And I don't particularly know a lot of scandal behind Stan Lee, like there was scandal behind Walt Disney. So I guess I would have been interested to hear a little bit more if there was a lot of scandal or negativity. I would have liked to have heard a little bit more about that, because I left this documentary being very pro Stan Lee.
Yeah, so he and they touched down there when it got into like the 70s and he became more of a the face of the company. He was always kind of the face of the company in that, he would write the editorials and everything, and Excelsior, Stanley Excelsior, but I think in the 70s, he was the face in that he would go out on interviews and he would, do a lot of press. So he really became synonymous with Marvel. And I think in doing that, they downplayed the work of others. And so I wouldn't say it's like this huge scandal. He was this awful person per se. He was just a good salesman for both Marvel and himself. And in doing so, he probably left some wounded pride behind. But I wonder if part of the reason they didn't really have much is, I wonder how many interviews are out there with some of these other artists, because I mean, we are really talking about, a lot of this prime time was 50s, 60s, 70s. Is there a lot of media? I mean, nowadays there's interviews, you interview the grip on the movie, or whatever. But back then, I wonder if the other artists even really had a voice. So I wonder if that's why we didn't see it. But they certainly could have been a little more even-handed with it, for sure.
And that kind of does lead us into our third question. So, is Stan Lee the Walt Disney of comic books? Is he the godfather of the entire medium? Is he the one who should take credit for its massive popularization? Is he everything that Walt Disney is to animation? Is Stan Lee that to comic books? And Kate, I'm going to start with you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. Yes. But just like Walt Disney, I mean, to answer your question, yes, absolutely. But just like Walt Disney had a couple of those core guys supporting him, I think Stan Lee also had those two other gentlemen supporting him. Like, it wasn't just him all the time, even though he tried to take credit for it, like Pete said. But yeah, I mean, talk about a rags to riches story, and started from the bottom. Now we're here, creating something, in my opinion, to better the world, to bring joy and comedy and hope, especially at a time during World War II where there was not a lot of hope. I think, and just his entrepreneurial spirit, and God, I'm such a big fan. Although now I'm like, should I not be a big fan? I don't know.
No, it's fine.
But yeah, I love, yeah. Yes, I would say he is the Walt Disney of comics. Pete, what do you think?
Well, it's a tough thing because Walt Disney revolutionized so much of entertainment in I mean, not just cartoons, but movies and television, and I mean theme, all of those things are what they are today with how he developed things. And I would also say, I know there was the conflict between him and Ub and things like that, but I think especially in the later years, Walt did give a lot of credit to his artists and things like that. So yeah, if there's, let's put it this way, if there's a name in comic books that's the equivalent of Walt Disney, it's Stan Lee, because he did have his hand. And I mean, regardless of what level of credit he should be giving other people, he had his hand in all these characters that they mentioned. He had his hand in Captain America and Hulk and Iron Man and Fantastic Four and the Spider-Man. And, so almost every big Marvel character from the 40s to the 80s, to the X-Men, even, which I guess was that late 70s, early 80s, probably X-Men. He had his hand in those things, and did bring comics more to the mainstream, and so bringing people into contact with the artists, because in those Marvel books they would have the notes. Stan Lee would write the notes and everything like that, or they so I think not to the extent that Walt Disney is, but yes, he's certainly the Mount Rushmore of comic books. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
For sure. So, Steve?
Pete, I want to agree with you. I mean, he's up there, but not quite on the same level. I think I look at the DC side growing up, the superheroes that I was more into was the DC side. So I think the Marvel side was missing there. Where I think Disney so much impacted so many other things that people started copying what he was doing or trying to implement the same things. So I'm going to say with you, definitely, it was a Mount Rushmore of comics. His face has to be up there, but not necessarily the only person. Derek, what would you say?
Not even close. Not even close to the influence of Walt Disney. First, Pete, just as a point of information, X-Men 1963.
Oh, holy cow. That early, huh?
Yes,
Okay.
that's when they came out. Because that's all he talked about it with the people that are different. That was I Have a Dream speech was 63. Kennedy being killed was 63. So that Vietnam was starting up, was in the early to mid 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Now, US wasn't as involved as they were, but yeah, 1963 is when X-Men came out. You guys talk about him being on the Mount Rushmore of comics. He can be up there with a couple slaveholders. I get it, because it seems appropriate. This is the documentary that Walt Disney would have made if he wanted to promote Walt Disney, because yes, in the end, he gives a little bit of credit, but no one ever got more credit than Walt Disney on anything. So in that way, yeah, he's kind of like Walt Disney. Kate, you said he bettered the world with all these different comics and all that kind of stuff. He just took over from someone else on some of these. On Captain America was out. He came in and they were already making Captain America comics. So he didn't come up with Captain America. He didn't.
No, and it didn't say he did either.
No, but I'm just saying, the whole giving him credit for all these different characters, some of the ones that he started with that made him popular, he didn't come up with. He just took those characters over.
See, I thought Spider-Man was his first
Fantastic
first one
Four.
was the kind of-
Fantastic Four was his first
Oh.
real.
Um,
Yeah.
Got it.
But Spider-Man was very early too.
Spider-Man was early, but yeah, Fantastic Four was first. Again, I think if you talk about him using other people to further himself, yeah, he is the Walt Disney of comic books. If you talk about the so wide of influence, if you look at it until the Iron Man movie came out, Marvel was not nearly as popular in this country. Wasn't even close to as popular in this country until the MCU started. That is
I would say this. Spider-Man was way up there, but everything else, no.
right. Yeah, because there was, Spider-Man in the 70s and 80s, there were the cartoon shows.
Yeah.
But even those had kind of died out in the 90s.
But I'll agree,
So-
it was, growing up, it was all Super Friends and, Batman and
Yeah.
And the biggest one back then was the Incredible Hulk, because you had the TV show.
Yeah, the TV show. Yes.
So,
That was, did it go 2 seasons? Maybe.
I think it went like 3. It
Did it
wasn't.
go
It
3?
wasn't on a super long time.
Yeah, the Lou Ferrigno
yeah.
Incredible Hulk. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have a hard time saying he's the Walt Disney of anybody is the Walt Disney of anything. Just
Right.
because you can't put Walt into one category. It's some of the first very super popular comics were the Mickey Mouse comics. Those were some of the first comics to go completely worldwide, were the Mickey Mouse comics.
Mm-hmm.
You've got his working with the merchandisers, working with
they were really the first. The Walt Disney Company was really the first to merchandise a character and put it everywhere.
Yeah, because the original Mickey was everywhere,
right?
And it made Walt a ton of money.
But that's my point, though, that he was so even television very early on. The studios wanted nothing to do with television because it was the competition, and Walt said, "Wait a second, this is great because I can get directly to people with fairly cheap shows."
And he was the first one to film in color. Like all of those original World of Color, all those original Disneyland shows were actually filmed in color.
Yeah.
Because
he knew that someday people would have color
coming.
TVs.
Yeah. So
he was really, and again, you can say whether he took credit for a lot of people's work. He was the boss,
which he did.
Well, he did, but so did Steve Jobs. So does Elon Musk. So does, every person that's in a what's his name? Mark Zuckerberg. They all do.
Right. And I'm not saying any of them are right to do it.
But when you're the face of the company, sometimes it makes sense.
But there's
Walt eventually became Uncle Walt. He was on TV every week, and people loved him. I grew up loving Uncle Walt. He was dead for 15 years when I was watching him, and I didn't even know it because I was a kid.
Oh yeah,
and you'd still watch him on your TV every Sunday, and it was so he.
And I totally agree, but he was never a person to say, if a person said, yeah, I'm the one that, I can, the Sherman Brothers are the ones that came up with basically the storyline of Mary Poppins. He never said, no, I told you to do Mary Poppins, so I'm really the one who created the story.
Right. No, he didn't do that. Yeah.
Right. So, again, and Stan Lee did do that. So.
I don't really understand why they couldn't be co-creators. Like, why couldn't?
Because he's a glory hog.
Ego.
And a jerk.
He's.
My one redeeming factor of Stan Lee is he was married to his wife for so many years. And they seemed very much in love their entire marriage. That's about all I have positive to say about Stan Lee.
Wow.
I
watched the same documentary.
Yes, we did.
Wow.
I cannot forgive the way he treated people. I have a huge problem with.
Wow.
So, and even today, there are still lawsuits between Marvel and the families of the animators. Like Disney's in with is it the guy who helped co-create Spider-Man?
Kirby.
Yeah, Kirby. He's in. Disney and Marvel are in a lawsuit with his family about how much royalties should he get still today, because Stanley didn't give him the credit. And so this is still going on because he didn't want to acknowledge anybody else's help. So, okay, as we always do, on the basis of the documentary alone, not what you feel about Stan Lee, Pixie Dust Cup ratings out of 5. Kate, what you got?
I'd give it a solid 3.5.
I'm gonna give it a 3. I did enjoy it for the most part. As I said, I felt it was a little light on the bad side of, not even a little light. It was very light on the bad side of Stan Lee, but I still think it told the story of Marvel well. So I give it a 3.
I also give it a solid 3. I liked it. Derek?
I'm going to give it a 2.5 just because it's not as bad as some of the stuff I've given a 2 to. But I'm right between a 2 and a 2.5, to be perfectly honest. I had a hard time. Now, then again, I'm not a Marvel guy. So this is one of those where if you're not a Marvel guy, paying attention to the guy who created all the Marvel, it was kind of a hard watch. But to me, I'm going to go 2.5, just to honestly kind of give it a little bit of the benefit of the doubt to accommodate for how much of it is me not liking Marvel. But I thought there were issues with the documentary itself. So, okay. Also going on this week, we watched Secret Invasion episode 4, The Quest for a Longer Nap.
It was a very short episode.
It was the shorter nap because it was only 30 minutes long. Basically, we confirm Rhodey is a Skrull.
He's a woman Skrull too.
Female Skrull, yeah. Gaia comes back to life, which we all figured that was going to happen.
Thank God they didn't drag that out, though. It was right at the beginning of the episode. It was like, okay, well, good.
They attempt to assassinate the president, Gravik. Did I get that right? Gravik. Their group tries to assassinate the president and make it look like the Russians. In that fight, Thalos dies, killed by Gravik, and Nick Fury and his wife essentially split because all this time she's been trying to manipulate him and has now been ordered to kill him. And there was a real interesting scene though, where basically they both had their gun at each other and they fired and they both missed on purpose. So
that was
neither one of them really wanted to kill the other person.
That was a pretty solid scene.
Yes. And then the whole, would you have loved me if you'd known who I was the entire time? And he said, I guess we'll never know. So I'm not convinced we've seen the last of those two together. And I don't think that's the resolution to their relationship at all.
Nope.
And I've already seen some previews for episode 5 that make things at least a little interesting. But it was interesting, Gravik having Groot's ability to shoot out, like, at least what to me looked like the stuff he shot out looked like the branches and stuff. Yeah. But one interesting part is when they talk about the gal that Fury's wife took over from, essentially, and she essentially had her blessing to assume her personality. Don't know if you guys noticed in the background, but either as the Skrull or as the original scientist, she's one of the ones that did a lot of the research into the X-Men and what made the X-Men and how the X-Men were mutants. Because there's a couple shots in the background of a book written by her.
Yeah.
So mutants are coming. And mutants, I think, are
we
coming
know
rather
that.
quickly. No.
Yeah,
Mutants are coming, and I think mutants are coming rather quickly.
for sure. Yeah.
If nothing else, they're officially coming in Deadpool. But
Right.
Deadpool's always kind of been off on its own. But it's one of those where the mutants are coming, and they keep dropping all these little breadcrumbs along. So, guys, I guess my big question is, was there anything in this episode that was truly that surprising?
Oh shoot. No, I watched 4 and 5 and now
Kate, look at your Facebook chat. I give you the summary of
no,
what
I know, but there's one thing that you all keep talking.
Okay.
Did you say
I will say,
Go
I
ahead.
love Olivia Colman's character. Can't remember her name, but
That's what I was gonna say.
She wasn't in this episode at all.
she was
Okay.
in this episode. She was in this episode just a tiny bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
She wasn't.
Yeah,
I watched
very
one this
little.
morning, but
So
Did you watch 5, Steve?
I'm all caught up. So I watched
Okay.
4 and 5.
Okay, that
Am I the only one that hasn't watched 5?
I've not watched
brother.
5.
So that's why I'm probably confused. I watched 4 and 5. So
So I'll tell you the intro. I keep trying to figure out what my issue is with this show, because it should be in my wheelhouse that I tend to like, generally, with the exception of I love the Guardians movies. I tend to like my favorite Marvel stuff is when it's kind of grounded in reality. None of it's grounded in reality, but you know what I mean? Like it's more not wizards and space creatures and things like that. So I realize there's aliens in this, but I was kind of looking forward to this series because it was like a spy story, and I was like, oh, this is this. But the problem I feel like I'm having with this series is like, this is a big deal. You have these aliens, and there's a million of them on the planet hiding in plain sight.
And where the hell are the Avengers?
And they're taking. Well, no, it isn't even that. It's like the whole thing is so small scale. I mean, even the thing with the, he's going to kidnap the president, and he's got like 2 helicopters and 12 guys. I mean, this is like this supposed to be this big war, and the one side is Fury and Talos. Is basically 2 people, and then the other side is like Gravik and like 20 people, it feels like, and it's just like the show feels so small scale to me, and Marvel rarely feels this small scale as this show did. It's like they realized how much money they were spending on these shows, and they weren't making their money back. And they said, on this series, we're going to cut the budget way back, and we got to pay Sam Jackson. So we have no money to actually have like big events. So it's, this is the biggest thing that happened so far is a convoy of 5 trucks attacked by 2 helicopters.
Since we didn't see a lot of explosion aftermath in the first one. Yes.
Yeah.
To me, it just feels kind of thrown together. Like, all right, how can we
need to get the Skrulls involved, and Nick Fury we've got under contract.
And like, is anybody real? I don't know. It just, I want to like it. It's not grabbing me like I wish it would, especially when you have the rock star cast that they have with Olivia Colman and Emilia Clarke and Sam Jackson and
Don Cheadle.
Cheadle. Like,
yeah, I mean, there's some really good
Yeah.
scenes,
mhm.
right? There's some really good scenes between these characters, but the overall thing is just not coming together in my feeling. I don't know. As I said, it almost feels like a Marvel play.
Especially because in the beginning of this episode, they talked about the attack and said, make it huge, put on an extreme show to make it look like it's the Russians.
Right.
You got 20 guys and like 3 more vans and a couple of helicopters, and that's the Russians making a big deal of kidnapping the president.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he uses his Groot powers, which are like, well, now it's clearly not. No, the Russians have Groot powers. What's going on?
Well, yeah, I don't think. Yeah. the trick on that is no one saw him use the group powers type thing. But no, like the president didn't see him, and the president's so far the only one we know we can trust. So, and even then,
Yeah.
So I know it's just we've got 2 episodes left, and
I also don't get how they're going to wrap this up in 2 episodes, but we'll see.
I don't think there's any way they can, just because the Skrulls are still going to be around. They may be able to get rid of Gravik, maybe, but even then, if he's got the regenerative powers, how do you get rid of him?
Yeah, but there were a whole bunch of people that had Extremis in Iron Man 3, and they killed them all. So
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm sure they could find a way, but yeah, I don't know. This isn't the worst Marvel show, She-Hulk, but
Ms. Marvel.
It's I would put it above Miss Marvel. There's not much I would put below it so far. Again, I'm gonna watch it through the end. I'm definitely curious enough to watch it through the end, but this is definitely one I don't ever see revisiting.
Oh no. I can guarantee this one never get a revisit, and we can pray there's not a season 2. So
yeah. I think this will be a filler show. I don't think there will be a season 2. I think that
lately, is it bad that lately I've gotten that feeling on a lot of the Marvel shows? They're kind of filler shows.
Well, yeah. I mean,
a couple of them, yes, are setting up basically the new iteration of characters. Like you've got the new Hawkeye, you've got Ms. Marvel. Obviously, was a prequel to the Marvels, but
the first few felt important.
WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, those 2 definitely felt so much different.
And Loki, I would say. Those 3 felt very important to the overall story. Since then, I don't think any. And again, I really loved Moon Knight, but it didn't feel important.
No, and I love it. That's not something. And part of me says, okay, if the planets and everything if the sky is being manipulated and moved, how is that not a bigger deal around the world? I mean, let's talk about the Eternals. All of a sudden, the Earth has this big rock statue of a person sticking out of it, and no one's saying anything. The last movie
since the first Avengers and the alien invasion, everything that everybody just kind of shrugs everything off. It's like, half the people died.
Yeah.
What can you do? What can you do? They're all back. Oh boy.
Yeah. Okay. So, Kate, what have we got for the Disney Plus news?
Yeah, Disney Plus news. As I'm not muted right now. Okay, good.
Nope.
As a casualty of the writer's strike, production on the live action Moana has been paused. And this kind of goes with that, but I hope everybody listening to this, and I think that I speak on behalf of the tuners, and please correct me if I don't. We love, obviously we wouldn't be doing Plus Platoon if we didn't love Disney Plus and love the Disney Plus shows. All of that being said, I hope that I speak for the rest of the tuners that we do support our actors and writers in this strike. And we want everyone to be able to make a living wage and to be compensated correctly for their art and their work, whether that is streaming shows, whether it's writing shows, acting. So I just wanted to make a blanket statement for anybody listening to this that we as a platoon, you all agree with me, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you can say if you don't, but
no, it's easy to think of actors as,
multimillionaires,
right? As Tom Cruise or whatever, and that is like 0.1% of the Actors Guild.
Right.
The Actors Guild is mostly people that are, showing up to auditions every day and maybe occasionally get a Charmin bathroom commercial.
Correct.
And really are kind of struggling day to day. Right. Writers are I would argue, probably the most important piece of
Yes.
media.
Yes.
More so. I mean, not that actors aren't important, but there's many actors you can put into something,
Right.
whereas the writer's verse is telling us the story. And so, you think of the greatest, shows, and a lot of them come from the writer.
Yeah.
Or the writers. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Kate. That like these billionaires saying we can't afford to pay these people is ridiculous.
Yeah. Right. So I just wanted to come out and say that, because I know that it could be viewed that we are not supporting the strike because we review shows on Disney Plus. We are continuing to support Disney Plus. We are continuing to support streaming services. I just wanted to take a minute to say, like, we do support the writers' strike. We do support the actors' strike, and hope that it comes to a swift conclusion, because I don't like my friends and things to be out of work. I also feel like we are in for some time of terrible television.
Yep.
But we're also in for some time of actually being able to go back into the vault and look at some of the old stuff.
That is accurate. That is fair. So anyway, I will step off my soapbox now. But last but not least, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 will be debuting on Disney Plus on August 2nd. And that's
tying into that, next week's show is Guardians 2. So that gives us Guardians 2. Then we'll basically be doing Guardians 2. We'll be doing the end of Secret Invasion. Then we'll be doing Guardians 3. So those are the next 3 weeks. Also, in the upcoming weeks, we're going to be looking at approximately an episode a week of the Star Wars Rebels animated series to prepare us for Ahsoka. For next week, we will be looking at season 1, episode 1, the very first episode of Rebels, because that's going to introduce us to 3 or 4 very important characters that will be showing up.
It's a 2-part episode too, so
it's a 2-part episode. Okay, so 1 and 2 then.
Yeah.
So episodes are about 20 minutes each, so that's not too bad. So guys,
yeah, and our resident Star Wars folks, myself and Gina, both feel pretty strongly that Ahsoka, there's a lot of characters in this show that are from Rebels and have a very wide-ranging backstory, which you really can't get from just a few episodes. But it's also hard to watch 70 episodes of a show in a month. So we're kind of trying to between the two of us and Derek, we're looking at what the most important episodes are. And also, you said, right, Dave Filoni's recommendation as
some
well.
of his recommendations too. Yeah.
So at least you're aware of the characters and their relationships and things like that. So,
okay, guys, if you have suggestions, because obviously we're going to need some stuff to watch coming up here with nothing new coming out, please email us at plusplatoon@gmail.com. We will use them. We will have you on if you'd like to be. We come out with new episodes every Thursday on YouTube and all the major podcasting services. For Kate, Pete, Steve, Gina in the background, thank you, everyone. We will see everyone next week. Bye, guys.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Bye. Thanks for watching this week's episode of the Plus Platoon. Be sure to subscribe to the Plus Platoon podcast to keep getting great content each week. Then head over to Apple Podcast and leave those 5-star reviews, as they help make the Plus Platoon visible to even more Disney Plus fans. Also, go to YouTube and like and subscribe to the Plus Platoon channel, where you can watch all future episodes live. If you have a question for the Plus Platoon, please send us an email to plusplatoon@gmail.com or connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @PlusPlatoon.
The Plus Platoon is a Disney Plus fan podcast and is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company or the Disney Plus streaming service. All opinions expressed on the show are solely those of the individual hosts and in no way reflect the views of the Walt Disney Company.
Thanks for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for next week's episode, because the Plus Platoon is to be continued.